Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Senate Finance and our guests. Good afternoon, colleagues. It is Tuesday, April 4th, and you have a green sheet in front of you. We have one bill that we will hear for consideration this afternoon prior to our voting session. That bill is Senate Bill 974, State-Owned Nursing Homes, Deficiencies, Citations, and Fines, Contractor Reporting Requirements. Senator Bailey is here. Good afternoon, Senator.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and distinguished members of the Finance Committee. For the record, Senator Bailey representing St. Mary's and Calvert County District 29. Senate Bill 974 is emergency legislation that would require increased reporting of deficiencies cited and enforcement actions imposed at state-owned nursing facilities in response to the recent reports of mistreatment of our veterans at Charlotte Hall Veterans Home. Thank you to each of you for co-sponsoring this legislation and your support for the introduction of this bill and referring it directly to this committee. I'm not going to repeat my remarks made when I introduced the bill on the floor. Instead, I'll refer you to my written testimony that you have. I want to add that while there is currently only one state-owned nursing facility, this bill is broadly drafted to ensure that any future facilities would be covered by its provisions. Senate Bill 974 is not intended to be a substitute for action to fix what went wrong at Charlotte Hall. However, I believe it is necessary to ensure that major problems such as these cannot be swept under the rug or kept from the oversight of the General Assembly. I respectfully request a favorable report on Senate Bill 974. Thank you for your consideration, and I will stand for any questions.
Thank you very much. Senator Beidle.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, Senator, thank you for the bill. You and I have had little conversations. And one of the questions that I asked you was, had OHCQ done their annual survey at Charlotte Hall? And I don't see OHCQ here or the Health Department or the Department of Aging. I see no testimony from them. But have you had conversations with OHCQ, and what do you know about the annual survey?
So I've had conversations with many different groups, not them directly, but I've had conversations with the governor's office and with their representatives for that. And that they suspended, as a result of COVID, they suspended their inspections. So that would have been prior to these infractions occurring. And then as a result of COVID, when it came back, they did not take the same role in inspections that they had done before, pre-COVID. Some of those inspections could potentially have uncovered some of what we are dealing with.
Sounds like something we need to look at in the interim, but thank you for the bill and for taking care of our veterans.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll go Senator Ellis, then Senator Reedy.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Senator Bailey, for your leadership with this bill. I know it's a reporting bill to kind of keep legislators informed of future issues at Charlotte Hall. As a veteran and having lots of colleagues, lots of comrades, and American Legion and Veterans Foreign War, VFW, Disabled American Veterans, DAV, and all these groups that are out there. I'm very curious in how these problems went without surfacing on my radar screen. As a veteran, I'm a member of a lot of these groups, veterans organizations. And so, you know, when we received a report from the new Secretary of Veterans Affairs, as first time I heard about these issues. So have you heard anything as far as what happened where this information, what was happening was just, it seemed like it was bottled up at the facility and not really out informing not just the legislators, but to our veteran advocacy organizations like American Legion, Disabled American Veterans, which are very active in really protecting and promoting the rights and privileges and benefits for America's veterans.
I greatly appreciate the question. I want to clarify a couple things that I found out about this, by a call to go to the second floor and meet with the Secretary of Veterans Affairs, and went over there, and they said, this is what's happened. It's good. Tomorrow it's going to be in front of the Public Service Commission, and we're going to look for a new vendor. And so as far as contacting the prior secretary and trying to place the blame or find out how that went, I have not had any conversations with those issues. But I will tell you that what I did do was start looking into it to try to figure out the fines that were associated with the mistreatment of our veterans. And in April of 2021, the group that was representing Charlotte Hall paid $164,195 in fines. Then again, in 8/15/2022, they paid another over $100,000 in the mistreatment. And so as far as that goes, that's exactly why I started working with the administration and with the Secretary of Veterans Affairs so that we could make sure that if anything like this occurred again, we would know right away. And then if you look at the legislation, you'll see that within 30 days, they will have another meeting with us where we can then be part of the solution moving forward.
Right. Thank you for the answer, Senator. So, as a trained military officer, we don't look to blame or to find fault, but we have after action reports to see what happened, good and bad, to make sure that whatever happened bad doesn't happen again, surprise us, and whatever is good, we can replicate. So my question is not to find fault, but similar to an after action report to say, hey, how did this slip through the cracks? And I know your bill will help to fix that issue on a more formal basis. But I will talk to you offline as far as this issue is concerned and work with our veterans organizations to make sure that we have more watchful eye.
I greatly appreciate the opportunity to work with you. And I have been in conversation and talked to some of the people who work at Charlotte Hall, right? Actually, the actual caregivers that are there. And there are some good people who have dedicated years and years of their lives to be in there. There's some of my constituents, some of yours, and I want to make sure that we support them. But no matter who's managing that resource that we have in the state of Maryland, I want to make sure that we can make sure it's adequately reported.
Yeah.
So that we don't ever let somebody be treated or have the fear that if you were putting one of your loved ones there, that there could potentially be an abuse rating. That is just horrid to me.
Yeah. Thank you, Senator. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senators. We're going to go Senator Reedy, Senator Lamb, Senator Guile.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Senator Bailey. I'm happy with all of us co-sponsored the bill. They're having a facility that's going to be built in Sykesville that's in my district. So I'm glad that this will be in place. Hopefully, we're going to approve it and it'll be in place. Can you just repeat something that you said? So inspections were paused. Was it paused in like March of 2020, basically because of the pandemic, and then inspections didn't continue at any point until recently by the state?
That's correct.
Okay, so it's another one along the line of unintended consequences of sort of overreaction. So to COVID. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Lamb.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to answer Senator Vital's question from earlier, we did get a letter from MDH, but it just came in at 12:51. So that's probably why you haven't had a chance to see it yet. And they did submit a letter of support from the Department of Health. Right. It was emailed to our offices.
Thank you, Senator Guile.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Senator Bailey, for your work on this important bill. I'm wondering, ultimately this bill puts the onus on the contractors to report deficiencies. And I mean, there are a lot of things this particular contractor was not doing? Like, how can we be assured that they are going to comply with these new reporting requirements?
So I appreciate your question, Senator, because that's very important that we make sure that we are following it up. One thing that I would say is number one, in reference to the last question that we just had, the Department of Health is going to start back up their inspections.
Okay,
Okay, so we're going to have routine people there. And the second is, as part of their agreement with the state, if and during any inspection, if there's a problem, we will then be made aware of it.
okay. All right. Thank you, Senator. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Are there any further questions for the sponsor? Seeing none, I just want to thank you and join my colleagues in thanking you for bringing this bill forward. This is, I mean, just reading that the information, we became aware of it in the way that we did, and knowing that those who protected and served us were not being protected and well served is very troubling. So thank you for the bill, and thank you for your presentation today.
Thank you all very much. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Seeing no further questions, that will conclude the hearing on Senate Bill 974. Colleagues, we are going to literally stay in your seats. We're going to be ready to vote in just a minute. Good afternoon again. Long time no see, colleagues. You have in front of you, today is still Tuesday, April 4th, for those who are wondering. You have in front of you a yellow sheet of paper that says voting list number 27. Before we take up that list, a request has been made on the bill that we just heard, Senate Bill 974. And I see no questions or concerns on that bill. So if there is interest, I would take a motion. Have a motion and a second for a favorable on Senate Bill 974. Seeing no questions, all those in favor, raise your hand. That bill receives a unanimous favorable report. Now we'll turn to the yellow sheet in front of us, and we are going to turn to Nathan, who has a number of bills, and then we'll hear from Patrick and David later. Good afternoon, Nathan.
Good afternoon. The first bill on the list is House Bill 103, which, as amended and shown in the reprint, is identical to Senate Bill 145, which passed the Senate unanimously earlier this session. So the bill authorizes the State Board of Social Work Examiners to issue a conditional license to an applicant who, except for passing the required examination, has otherwise completed the education and experience requirements for a license to practice bachelor or master social work. The board may issue a conditional license if an administrative delay prevents a required examination from being available to an applicant for at least 15 business days. The bill further requires the board to report specified information about the issuance of conditional licenses to specified committees. The amendments, again, conforming House Bill 103 to Senate Bill 145, authorizes the board to issue a temporary license to practice bachelor social work or master social work to an applicant who, except for passing the required examination, has met the appropriate education and experience requirements for licensure. A temporary license is valid until the earlier of notification of permanent licensure or 2 years after the date on which the temporary license is issued. The bill is also amended to be an emergency act that will remain in effect until July 1st of 2025, when the bill sunsets.
Have a motion and a second for a favorable on House Bill 103 as conformed to look like Senate Bill 145. Seeing no questions, all those in favor of House Bill 103 as amended, raise your hand. That bill receives a unanimous favorable report. We'll turn to the next bill.
The next bill is House Bill 695, which alters the required distribution of money from the Rural Maryland Prosperity Investment Fund by modifying the grant category to also include agricultural development, cooperative development, and workforce development. There are no amendments. There is no opposition at the committee hearing. I'll note that it appears that the favorable with amendment testimony in the system was meant as favorable with the amendments that passed the House. So there is no opposition.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion and a second for a favorable on House Bill 695. I see no questions, so all those in favor of that motion, raise your hand. That bill receives a unanimous favorable report. Next bill.
House Bill 870 requires the Division of Rehabilitation Services in the Department of Education and the Developmental Disabilities Administration within the Department of Health to enter into a memorandum of understanding that includes a data sharing agreement for the medical and psychological records of mutual clients in order to expedite decisions regarding eligibility for services. There are no amendments, there is no fiscal impact, and there was no opposition at the hearing.
Okay, I have a motion and a second for a favorable on House Bill 860. I see no questions. All those in favor of that motion? I'm sorry, 870. Phew, this is the second day in a row. I've been seeing things and I'm not a machine. All right. House Bill 870 is before you. Seeing no questions, all those in favor, raise your hand. That bill receives a unanimous favorable report. We'll turn to the next bill.
House Bill 1109 exempts Prince George's County from the statewide Business Improvement District law and establishes a separate law solely for Prince George's County that authorizes the county to establish business improvement districts. The bill specifies the procedures and requirements for establishing a district, including the creation of specified boards of directors and steering committees, public notification regarding the establishment of a district, district expansion, funding, taxing authority, and the evaluation and termination of a business improvement district. There are no amendments. There is no fiscal impact. There was no opposition at the hearing.
Have a motion and a second for a favorable on. Okay, just a second. Have a motion and a second for a favorable on House Bill 1109. Senator Ellis has a question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Nathan, what's the difference between the state law that you mentioned and this Prince George's County?
So the sponsor of the bill pointed in their testimony as one of the difficulties of the statewide law is it requires the affirmative vote of 80% of the businesses in the district in order to establish such a district. And so this bill would set a lower threshold of, I believe, just a majority of the businesses in the district. And also, as I recall from the file, there is a similar law in effect currently for Montgomery County.
Great, thank you.
Any additional questions? Okay, seeing none, you have a motion and a second for a favorable on House Bill 1109. All those in favor, raise your hand. That bill receives a unanimous favorable report. We'll turn to the next bill.
Next bill is House Bill 1156, which authorizes a therapy management contract to be entered into orally or in writing, including in electronic form, and stipulates that if the contract is entered into orally, the contract must be reduced to writing by the parties within 30 days. There are no amendments. There is no fiscal impact. There was no opposition at the committee hearing. Notably, MedChi, the Pharmacy Board, and the Maryland Association of Pharmacists are all in agreement in their support of the bill.
Okay, we have a motion and a second for a favorable on House Bill 1156. I don't see any questions. So all those in favor, raise your hand. That bill receives a unanimous favorable report. We'll turn to the next bill.
The next bill is Senate Bill 954, which as amended and shown in the reprint is identical to House Bill 571 as amended, which is up next on the voting list. The bill requires the Department of Health to allow specified entities to choose the formulation or dosage of an opioid overdose reversal drug that is approved by the Food and Drug Administration, that the entity is provided through the state overdose response program. The amendments to the bill, to the Senate bill, which mirror those adopted in the House, came at the request of the Office of the Attorney General. The amendments pertain to the Opioid Restitution Fund and Opioid Restitution Fund Advisory Council. The ORF was established in 2019 to retain any revenues received by the state relating to specified opioid judgments or settlements, which may be used only for opioid-related programs or services. OAG advises that the specific judgments or settlement agreements may require the formation of a committee within the advisory committee to take certain actions. And in order to avoid needing to come back to the General Assembly each time such a committee is necessary, the Office of the Attorney General suggests the following, reflected in the reprints. So the amendments would authorize the Attorney General to direct the Opioid Restitution Fund Advisory Council to form subcommittees to conduct business related to the purpose of a court or administrative order or settlement agreement. The amendments would further authorize the state to receive funds from opioid-related court or administrative judgments or settlement agreements, and the Secretary of Health to establish and administer a grant program to distribute the funds in accordance with the judgment or agreement. Then the amendment further amends the effective date. And there's also an additional amendment to the bill offered by the chair at the request of the Department of Health to clarify that the department shall allow an entity to choose the formulation of reversal drug subject to the limitations of the state budget. And that can be found on page 2. So the additional amendment offered by the chair at the request of the department will also be applied to the House bill, should the committee choose to do so.
Thank you. So you have before you Senate Bill 954 in reprint form with the amendment as requested by the Department of Health and the amendment that was adopted in the House. Are there any questions regarding this bill or the amendments?
Move favorable.
Okay, so I have a motion and a second for a favorable on the reprint of Senate Bill 954 with both sets of amendments. Seeing no questions, all those in favor, raise your hand. Okay, that bill receives a unanimous favorable with amendments. Next bill.
Next bill on the list is House Bill 571, as I just described, and shown in the reprint, including the additional amendment offered by the chair at the request of the department.
I'll entertain a motion. This is
Favorable.
have a motion and a second for House Bill 574, which mirrors the bill that we just passed. Seeing no questions, all those in favor, raise your hand. That's unanimous. Thank you. Next bill. Oh, I'm sorry, Senator Vital.
Just want to make sure the titles will match now after the amendment. The titles of the bills.
Thank you very much. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good question. Thank you. We'll move to the next bill.
You flip your yellow page over. You'll go to House Bill 502. This is very similar to Senate Bill 2. If you recall, there was an issue over the past couple of years where people were having their benefits stolen by the misuse or the appropriation of the information on their EBT card. So in response, legislation was introduced, several bills. There was 2 bills in the Senate, which were combined into one, and then there was a House bill, which is in front of you, House Bill 502. As amended, House Bill 502 is an emergency bill that requires the Department of Human Services to develop a process and to reimburse a beneficiary for any amount of benefits lost due to the fraudulent use of the beneficiary's EBT card. The bill also specifies requirements relating to the procurement process for EBT or for electronic benefits distribution or administration. It requires a new EBT card in the event of stolen benefits and prohibits the requiring of a police report in the event of stolen benefits, and provides an appeal process if restoration of benefits are denied. Again, the House bill is largely similar to the Senate bill. There are 2 differences, and you also have a reprint in front of you with some technical amendments to the House bill. I'll go over the very quickly what's the same and where some of the 2 differences are. On page 1 of the technical amendment, there's a change to the purpose paragraph. It's purely technical, corrects a wording mistake. On page 2 of the reprint, all this page and most of page 3 of the reprint are identical to the Senate bill. There's slightly different wording, lines 9 through 12. If you go to page 4 of the reprint, it's largely the same. Also, the one thing that's missing in the House bill in front of you is that the Senate bill had language specifically saying that if there's no federal funds to reimburse stolen benefits, state funds would have to be used. The Appropriations Committee thought that created a fiscal problem, so they removed that. And if you go to page 5 of the reprint, again, a lot of the reporting requirement is the same, which runs through page 6. And another difference is the Senate bill established a theft benefit restitution fund. The Appropriations Committee did not establish the fund, but they kept all the operational language in place, which is on the bottom of page 6 through page 7. And they also, the Senate bill had a $2 million, from what I could tell, a one-time annual appropriation to this fund. And as you all know, in the budget that was passed, money was put into the budget by the governor to pay for these stolen benefits. So.
Hey, are there any questions? I'll give you all a minute. It looks like folks reading. Hey, I have a motion and a second.
And there's also these technical amendments to correct some of the wording and make things
And the reprint.
in a reprint. Yes.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second for a favorable on House Bill 502 as amended in the reprint before you. Senator Reedy?
The change with authorizing
Mhm.
versus requiring, is that to give them just a little more flexibility to make sure they can verify that there was theft, or is?
Well, it gives them an opportunity to say no if there was no theft. So you're authorizing the department to do it. It's consistent with the language in the bill.
I
So-
think that's good, actually, even though I really want to be sure we help these folks. I was curious about making sure. I understand it's not something where it's like require a police report, although that is partly required here, depending on what the kind of theft is. I think that's probably good. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Any additional questions? Seeing none, we have a motion and a second for a favorable on House Bill 502 as amended. All those in favor, raise your hand. That bill receives a unanimous report. Next bill.
Okay, the next bill on your list is House Bill 513. This involves legislation that I believe Senator Kramer sponsored several years ago. It continues on the implementation of that prevailing wage requirement on investor-owned utilities. It requires the Maryland Department of Labor to enforce an existing requirement that specified investor-owned utilities require contractors and subcontractors to pay their employees at least the applicable prevailing wage on certain underground projects. The bill also specifies that the prevailing wage rate for purposes of this requirement is the one determined solely by the Commissioner of Labor and Industry. in a process that is similar to the process for determining prevailing rates for public works contracts. So what the bill did was it brings in it applies sections of the labor and employment article regarding wage payment and collections. There's no state money here, so you can't use the enforcement provisions under the prevailing wage law to enforce non-payment of prevailing wage, but it gives the employees on these contracts the ability to appeal through existing law if they felt like they had not been paid the prevailing wage on these jobs.
Okay, are there questions on this bill? Seeing none? Have a motion and a second for a favorable on House Bill 513. Seeing no questions, all those in favor, raise your hand. That is 8. Those opposed, raise your hand. That is 3. That bill receives a favorable report with an 8-3 vote. Next bill.
Okay, next bill is House Bill 676. It establishes that a registered cemeterian, crematory operator or permit holder who sells public services for pet remains, cremation services, burial lot, etc., they owe a duty of perpetual care for the cemetery in which the pet remains are interred. You have a reprint in front of you with some amendments offered by the House sponsor. The amendments make changes to the definition of interment and to requirements for pre-need burial contracts consistent with the purposes of the bill. There are no opposition to this during the hearing.
Favorable.
Have a motion and a second for a favorable on House Bill 676. Are there any questions? Seeing none, all those in favor, raise your hand. That bill receives a unanimous favorable report. Okay, all right. Okay, we'll go to, that was David
That's-
now taking a break. We'll go to Patrick.
All right, next bill on the voting list is House Bill 128. This is the bill that requires a person who obtains a private passenger motor vehicle insurance policy at the time the policy is purchased to opt out of obtaining enhanced underinsured motorist coverage through a waiver process instead of opting into the coverage under current law. In other words, it would make this enhanced underinsured motorist coverage the default coverage that you'd get under a policy. For a waiver to be effective under the bill, the insurer must give the insured written notice of the nature, extent, benefit, cost of the level of the EUIM coverage being waived, and a waiver must be made on a form required by the Maryland Insurance Commissioner that meets certain criteria and includes certain information. So the chair is offering an amendment. It's a reprint in front of you. And what that amendment, the chair's amendment would do is put a sunset on the bill after 3 years. So the bill would sunset on June 30th, 2026. And then it would move up the applicability date of the bill from July 1st, 2024 to January 1st, 2024. And then the MIA would have a requirement to study and report on certain matters relating to the conversion of enhanced underinsured motorist coverage from an opt-in coverage to an opt-out coverage option. And the study would include a comparison of the rate of selection of the EUIM coverage before and after the implementation of the act. It would include an analysis of the impact on premiums from the enhanced uninsured motorist coverage being offered as the default selection. To the extent information is available, it would include an analysis of the impact of offering this coverage as a default option on compensation for damages resulting from motor vehicle accidents, including the impact on out-of-pocket costs incurred by insureds for damages exceeding policy limits. And then it would include a review of notice and waiver procedures relating to the offering of this enhanced coverage as the default coverage option to assess whether consumers are aware of these coverage options and able to make an informed selection from the description of the coverage options and the per vehicle premium associated with each option. There would then be a requirement to make recommendations regarding any changes to the notice and coverage selection procedures to improve consumer awareness and informed decision-making regarding these options and any other relevant matters relating to the offering of these coverages. This report will be due at the end of 2025 in advance of the 2026 legislative session and the sunset of the bill.
Okay, thank you. That's a lot. You have before you House Bill 128 in reprint with amendments, Senator Guile and then Vice Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess, Patrick, why was it what we determined, like designated 3 years as opposed to like the last amount of time, like 2 years? I don't know if you can comment on that at all, or something that's less. Is that the time that's needed in order to evaluate and do a proper study, perhaps?
Yeah, go ahead. Oh, sure. I mean, I think that's the idea, is that would give 2024 as a policy year and 2025 as a policy year to assess the
Okay.
impact of the change, making this the default coverage option, so that there would be a better understanding of how this is impacting premiums and
Okay.
selection.
And to confirm, this would only be on new policies, right? Not on renewals?
So,
Like if I have a policy right now that doesn't have enhanced uninsured motorists, I'm like, am I gonna automatically on the renewal of that policy, gonna be automatically opted in for enhanced uninsured motorists?
yeah, I think that's my read of the bill. I think
That I will be?
right. I don't think it's applicable to just new policies.
Okay. All right, and then have we, sorry, last question, Madam Chair. Have we spoken with anyone at MIA about the study and the amendments? I know they filed provided a letter of information, but I don't know if we've spoken with them about this proposed study.
So I spoke with an individual at MIA this morning about the proposal here to limit the bill to the sunset period and then have a study. And the feedback that they provided was more directed to just concerns about the policy in general, and expressing some view that maybe accelerating the applicability to January 1st could be challenging, but not impossible.
I'm sorry, I guess I don't understand. So they had some concerns about can you repeat that? What
Yeah,
their
so
concerns were?
what the bill does is it accelerates the applicability of the bill to
Right.
January 1st
Mhm.
instead of June.
Right.
And so the thought would be, is that something that would be challenging for carriers to be able to comply with? And by accelerating the implementation date by 6 months, you have to revise forms and have to submit these forms for review and approval by the MIA. So there would be more of a compressed time frame for those submissions to take place. That was the one thing that
Mhm.
that the MIA staff were providing feedback on.
Okay, but otherwise they didn't provide any thoughts regarding the study or anything like that, the proposed study.
Not specifics on the study.
Okay. All right, thank you, Patrick.
So just to clarify, and then I do see your questions, in the reprint of the bill, we have the effective date as January.
Correct.
In the bill as introduced, the effective date would have been
July.
July of this,
No, July of 2024. So
Okay.
instead of it being effective January 2020, in July of 2024, it would be implemented at the beginning of the year.
so if we were to take it back to the original date, that would give MIA more time to get the carriers time to get their paperwork together for this process.
It would, the trade-off would be, of course, there would be less time
To get the
to get
report, to
information.
collect the data. Okay, we'll continue the conversation. Senator Beidle, then the Vice Chair, then Senator Kramer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think the Vice Chair was before me, so I don't want to offend her.
I'm right-handed, so.
No, I just wanted to follow up with Senator Giles and just ask now, is this just for new policies? Is that what you ended up saying?
No, my understanding is that this would be applicable to renewal policies as well. So all policies, not just new policies going
So if-
forward.
If I would go to get insurance, right? It would say opt out. I mean, I'd automatically be put in and I wouldn't know the difference at that point, would I? That's why I think it should be just for new policies.
So it provides for it provides a waiver where you would waive the coverage. Yes.
Right, but that would be a very distinct paper that would give me the waiver. If I had an insurance with this one particular company and went to get it, or I guess if you renew it, it just comes in every year. Is that right?
Right. I mean, I think
So I
it's-
wouldn't know it.
Right.
So that's why I'm concerned about myself and everybody else in the room that has their insurance. At least if you're just getting a new contract with another company, it would be right there. So I'm concerned about that because I can just see I would opt out because I know it, but a lot of people aren't going to know it at that point. It's an automatic renewal. So conceptually, I might like an amendment like that. I've been waiting to say that all year long. Conceptually.
There may be an escalate, but okay.
You're not doing it. Oh,
Okay. Senator Vital, or was it Kramer?
No,
Okay,
I'm next.
Senator Vital next, and then
Thank you, Madam
Kramer,
Chair.
and then Hershey.
I don't like to step on anyone's toes, but not you or the vice chair particularly, so thank you. So this is the concern I have. On your current policy, whether you realize it or not, you made a choice to either opt in or not. So you may have chosen not to carry the coverage, and that's what you understand your policy to be. Now on the renewal, you're going to be forced to take this, even after you've signed a form at some point that you were opting out. Now it's being forced on you. So, and I carry the coverage. So, I mean, I think it's important, but people have chosen to opt out and now it's going to be on the renewal. That's my first issue. We had more unfavorables than favorables. And when you look at the testimony, but the one that I was most concerned about was from the Economic Action of Maryland, which is a consumer protection agency. And they were concerned about the increase in rates. Ladies and gentlemen, your auto rates are going to go up on your renewal. Cars have gotten more expensive, repairs have gotten more expensive, parts have gotten more expensive. Your rates are going up. This is going to increase your rates even more, which is probably going to cause more people to shop. And that's a whole nother issue that I can explain to you because I was in this business a long time. But why should we have a report if everyone has to opt in? What's the report going to show us other than the cost of the insurance? It's not going to tell us very much because everybody's in it unless they opt out. And, you know, we're saying maybe 2% of the people opted in or 2% of the people going to opt out. Are they going to know they have it? I just have concerns about when we've already made a decision on our policies. I think as the vice chair, that this should be on new business. When people are explained a policy, the coverages are explained, they're agreeing to their limits of liability, their deductibles, their coverage. This should all be part of a new policy, not be forced on folks at renewal.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Kramer.
So I think I'm on the opposite side of where Senator Guile was concerned in that the report seemed too long. I'm looking at it as being too short in that we're not going to have what at least appears to me to be a long enough window to be able to garner enough information to fully be able to grasp the implications of what we're doing here. And so, I mean, definitely if you end up moving that implementation date, as I think now is starting to float around in people's minds, that sunset date should be pushed out. I mean, I was going to suggest adding at least another year or possibly two in order to collect enough information so that there's actually an opportunity to see patterns or consistencies and get solid data. So I was just thinking that it seemed like too short a period to be able to really get information. So I was thinking, could it just be pushed out a little bit? And then we really do have something to digest and fully understand the implications. That's all I got.
Thank you. Noted. We'll go to Senator Hershey. We're just having a conversation right now.
Yeah.
Okay, Senator Hershey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think I share the same concerns. I remember the testimony. The concern from the proponents was that this was not being offered to the by the carriers to the insured. That there was not enough conversation about it, and therefore people were not electing to get it because you had to elect it. So the bill comes in, it says now automatically you're going to get it unless you opt out. But my concern is the same thing about, I think renewals are so easy now and so almost so automatic that I can see how this was not being provided to the insured because there's not much conversation anymore. You've had a policy, it gets renewed, you pay the bills and you're fine. I recently added a car to my policy and this did not come up. It was just, you want to put another car on, here are the rates. I could choose it, but I did it all online. So I'm not even talking to an insurance agent to begin with. So I think if we move forward the way that the bill came in, I'd be very concerned that all of a sudden every single renewal now has this. And I don't know that that conversation ever happened between the carrier and then the insured. So Madam Chair, going back to your amendment, it says the election of an insured to not obtain, I'm sorry, I'm on page 4. Down at the bottom, it says an election of an insured to not obtain enhanced uninsured motorist coverage. Am I on the right bill?
That's a different word.
No, I'm sorry. Is that same language in here somewhere?
That's not.
Is that my language? I don't know, wonder I liked it. I will defer my comments for later on those that amended language that I actually liked. But agree that I think if we cannot get to a decision, the collection of data is probably the best way to move forward. Thanks.
Senator Mounts.
Well, thank you, Chairman. And I wanted to point out, Mr. Barron from the MIA is in the room. And I don't know if we can involve others in our conversation, but one thing that's that I've gotten a lot of information about that I haven't quite determined affirmatively. I know some states already do this, right? Is that, and do we know what the cost is? I mean, do we have any firm statistics on what the cost has been?
Yeah, it depends. It varies.
And I always want to confirm based off of the discussion in this meeting that when the renewal occurs, the policyholder doesn't have the opportunity to opt out every time there's a renewal. So there's an automatic renewal, and if they're in, they stay in. And that's current practice. Is that accurate? It's a question for council.
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, I think if you look on page 4 of the reprint, this is actually generally current law. The way it has is unless the insured affirmatively makes a change in writing, the election to, and this is the current law, obtain enhanced uninsured motorist coverage applies to all subsequent renewals. So whatever that first election is, that's what continues on renewal unless there's some affirmative written instruction, some written change from the policyholder to the insured to the contrary.
Right, and that in the amendment that's in the bill that's before us right now, that issue is not addressed. Right, and is this open? Are we going to vote this today, or is this up for discussion?
We are discussing right now. Yep. Thank you. I have Senator Reedy, then we'll go back to Senator Vital.
On the renewal issue, what happens if you're renewing via internet or, how would you say something in writing?
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe there would be a form that would be an electronic form you could complete. I don't know. It could be something that the insurance administration would establish. But so I don't know, maybe there's some online mechanism where you could communicate in writing your change. But that could vary by carrier how that procedure works.
But it is true what was stated in the hearing and what we've heard about, because this is the second year we've had this, that if you have a certain amount of coverage and your accident exceeds, if your expenses exceed what the other person's coverage are, you can be out. You can't depend on your insurance to cover on top of that unless you have this insurance, correct?
Right. So, I mean, what this does is it enables you to access the full amount of your coverage to apply towards the damages on top of whatever was available from the other motorists.
And a lot of people aren't always given that information. Yeah. I definitely like I'm just giving it all a lot of thought. Thank you.
Okay, Senator Vital, this time your light was on before the vice chair, so we'll go to you and then.
Thank
back
you,
to the
Madam
vice
Chair. I want to go back to something that Senator Mott said about, once this is on your policy, it's just going to automatically renew every time unless you do something to change it. That's how I feel about the current opt-in coverage. It's on your policy now and it just renews the same way every time. And so we're overriding a choice that an insured already made by saying, well, this is a new choice. And if you don't do anything about it, you get the new choice. Do you understand what I'm trying to? And my other question is, who's going to design the form? Because we've all seen some of these forms from companies. Every company's different. Can we ask the MIA to design the form this time so that it's more consistent? Thank you.
Madam Vice Chair.
Yeah, on page 4. Now, okay, number 3. It says the form shall clearly and concisely explain in at least 10-point bold-faced type. My question is, what point is this that I'm reading now from the bill? Does anybody know?
So this is in the current bill, and this is laying out the requirements for the waiver.
She wants to know what 10-point font looks like. She's
Oh,
asking
I'm
what-
sorry.
Yeah, that's all I wanted, but because,
It's 12 or
well,
13.
I'd say it should at least be 20.
No, okay. Yeah.
She's actually serious, but let me just do this. Let me do a quick recap of what I've heard so far.
It needs to be bigger. I don't know what it is.
So I've heard the implementation date. Let me just get everybody's attention for just a minute. I've heard the implementation date raised and in the amendments, we considered moving it up so we'd have a longer period of time to collect data. It sounds like that moving the date up might be problematic. The second thing I've heard is, so that's basically the effective date of the bill, when this would start. As introduced, it was July 24, and that sounded better for the insurance administration. The second thing I heard is the length of time for data collection. I heard some who felt that might be too long and some who felt it might be too short. So that's something that we'll need to kind of discuss. Then I heard several people raise issues around how this works in terms of renewal versus new policy. So there are some who believe that if this is adopted, it should be for renewal policies moving forward. I mean, new policies, not renewal, or at least that we understand how this information would be communicated if someone is renewing their policy. Then I heard the practice of enrollment and what that process looks like, whether it's communicating in written form, whether it's on the website or some app, how that information is communicated to the policy holder that you have this option that you can opt in or that you now, if you don't want it, need to opt out. And then the last thing I heard raised is the size of the font in the forms. That would be no, that's legitimate. 10 is little. 10 is little. And so what I would suggest to you is we have in front of us a reprint on House Bill 128 with some suggested amendments that I've heard that there may be interest in possible modification to those amendments. I know other people have approached me and expressed an interest in other amendments. So I'm going to suggest that we hold the bill today and ask that if you have suggestions on the bill, that you would see Patrick or me before the floor session tomorrow, so that when we come together to vote again, we can have a conversation now based on the issues that have been raised, the suggestions that have been made. And Patrick said he's leaving and you won't be able to find him. No, I'm just kidding. But certainly just invite you to communicate. I think we've had a good conversation. We've heard one another's concerns. Is there anything that I missed on my list or anything anyone would like to add that we should consider as we take another look at this bill tomorrow? Okay, seeing none, then I'll look forward to hearing from those of you that have suggestions tonight and tomorrow morning, and we'll turn to the next bill. Good discussion. Thank you.
So the next bill on the list is House Bill 282. This is a bill that would alter provisions of law relating to the licensing of mortgage loan originators. The bill provides for the licensing of mortgage loan originators who are independent contractors, exclusively engaged by a licensed mortgage lender or a person exempt from licensing to act as a mortgage lender. I have some amendments in front of you that, so there was some concern that was raised by the Maryland Mortgage Bankers and Brokers Association about the scope of the authorization under the bill. And so some amendments that are before you have addressed those concerns, and it tightens up the bill a bit. So on page 3, this would limit the authorized licensing of mortgage loan originators who are independent contractors to persons who are also licensed insurance producers in good standing under state insurance law. So there's a business model that I think is currently being used by one of the mortgage lenders in partnership with an insurance, with an insurer. And so this would provide for that. And then there would be a reporting requirement on the Commissioner of Financial Regulation to report to legislative committees on complaints and violations of law or regulations relating to mortgage loan origination services and independent contractors. So those are the amendments that the chair is offering on this.
Hey, Senator Beidle.
Thank you, Madam Chair. What's the difference between a mortgage loan originator and a broker?
So I think a mortgage broker is they hold a different license. They have additional requirements that they need to meet. They have to have a surety bond. They're more responsible for the lending business and supervise mortgage loan originators, who are sort of the first level individuals who complete paperwork and do credit checks and
So they're
facilitate
like
the process of mortgage loan origination.
So they're like the business owner, the broker's like the business owner.
Right.
And the mortgage loan originators work for the broker.
Mhm, correct.
Are they typically self-employed or are they employees? They're only working for one
Mhm,
person. So does that make them an employee?
right. So they're typically employees. But in this case, there's a model that and a mortgage lender, a licensed mortgage lender, can also be a financial institution who's a lender. So they can be a license holder as well as sort of the more typical brokerage type of business that you're envisioning. But yes, so typically they are employees. But as I understand it, there's a business model, where Rocket Mortgage
I was going to say it's Rocket
partners
Mortgage.
with State Farm, and they have insurance producers who provide some of these mortgage loan origination services to.
So with the amendment, we're saying it's only those that are insurance agents that are also mortgage brokers that this will apply to.
Yeah, so
And
you'd
more
have to
concern,
be,
more
yeah,
concern.
so this would only apply to individuals who hold that insurance producer license and are in good
And-
standing.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Kramer.
So other than Rocket Mortgage, who are we looking to help here with this? It sounds like if you're licensed to sell insurance, you can now be making mortgage loans. And aren't there fairly rigorous standards at the moment to be a mortgage broker? And would those standards still be applicable, Patrick? I mean, I'm trying to get a handle on this, and where is the demand and need for having people who sell insurance now step into this entirely different field of lending? What's
Right, so this is already happening. And so the license and so the mortgage loan originator would need to be the one who's holding the license as an insurance producer. So any type of training that they have relating to their insurance producer responsibilities would not change, would not be impacted by this bill. And a mortgage loan originator would be subject to the same training training requirements that they're subject to under current law.
you're saying an insurance broker who now is going to start selling or producing mortgages will have to have the same training as a mortgage broker at this point? Is that?
When providing.
I'm trying to get a handle.
Right,
on
when providing loan origination services, they would have to hold a loan origination license, a mortgage loan origination license.
Who has to hold that?
That individual who's providing those services.
Okay.
So in this case, we're talking about an individual who's performing dual responsibilities as an insurance producer in that capacity, and then as a mortgage loan originator holding that license on behalf of the mortgage lender who they're engaged by.
So why do we need the bill? If they have to be licensed in both categories, what is the purpose of the bill?
Because under current law, the current law requires that individual, the mortgage loan originator, it's perceived under certain statutory provisions that it might be perceived that they need to be employees of the mortgage lender and not be allowed to be independent contractors
doing this.
Correct.
Okay. But there's no circumventing their licensing process. They have to have the exact same licensure.
That's right. That's right.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Okay, we've got Vice Chair, then Senator Reedy.
Now, I was just gonna say, I know they go through rigorous certifications every year just to be a mortgage officer, and I'm sure that's how these people will work as well.
Thank you. Senator Reedy.
Yeah, I think it's, I was just going to comment. I was trying to look at, remember what all the requirements are. I mean, there is federal authorization and requirements. I think it's really just the industry has morphed a lot over the last decade. So I think it's sort of almost like a cleanup. When it was first explained to me, and I was first walking through the bill, it was complex, but I think it's mostly trying to clean up the incongruity between some of the parts of our statute that are maybe a little dated. So I would move the bill favorable.
Okay, yes, it is an amendment, but can I go to Senator Mounts first? Thank you, Senator Mounts.
So I recall the hearing. I just a quick question. So we've got the amendment. Have the mortgage brokers weighed in on this?
Yes, they're fine with the bill as narrowed by these amendments.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second for a favorable on the amended version of House Bill 282. Are there any additional questions? All those in favor of the reprint, raise your hand. Okay, that's 10 and a half, Senator. That bill receives a unanimous favorable report. Didn't you get a? Okay, that's, so that bill receives a unanimous favorable report as amended. Next bill.
I think House Bill 1111, we're still waiting for a letter from the Senate delegation, so we'll have to hold that.
Bill was heard yesterday and maybe I'll give him another day.
Okay, so that
Delegation.
is the end of our voting list that we have in front of us. So thank you all very much. Session is scheduled for 10:30 tomorrow morning on the floor. Some of you will be here a little earlier than that for a work session on another bill. But other than that, stay tuned and stay close. And thank you all for the work. Meeting adjourned.
Chair.